For decades, he was the symbol of strength, success, and discipline, the living embodiment of the American dream. But behind that grin, behind the tattoos and muscles carved from myth, something darker was growing. A secret quietly shaping his legacy. It was not fame that would test him. It was the weight of being untouchable. Because when the truth finally began to surface, the world realized. Maybe even legends can fracture. Every camera adored him. Every studio wanted his name. Dwayne Johnson was everywhere, from the wrestling ring to the biggest movie screens on Earth. His laughter filled talk shows. His catchphrases ruled social media. Polls even claimed that nearly half the nation would vote for him if he ever ran for president. But behind the spectacle was a man whose identity had become a product. Each smile, each flex of the arm, each motivational quote was part of a carefully built empire. People saw a hero, not a human. The myth of invincibility grew so large that even he began to live inside it. His family spoke of how hard he worked, how early he woke, how much he gave, but no one saw what was being taken. The pressure to remain perfect began to coil like a shadow around his success, waiting for the right moment to tighten. Long before the fame, before Hollywood lights, there was a boy watching his father step into the ring. Rocky Johnson, a man built from fire and grit, whose muscles told stories of survival. His grandfather, Peter Maivia, carried the same warrior spirit, the same enormous frame. Those genes were his inheritance, a legacy of power that the young Dwayne could never escape. Old photographs show a strong athlete, broad-shouldered, disciplined, but human. There was warmth in his eyes and softness in his smile, long before the pressure of image turned him into a sculpture. Coaches remembered him as gifted but grounded. Yet as years passed, that natural athleticism became a burden. It was not enough to be strong. He had to look stronger than everyone. And with every new role, every new spotlight, the natural edge that once defined him began to disappear beneath an unnatural expectation. When he left the world of wrestling, his size frightened producers. They told him he looked too intimidating for the screen, that his presence would overshadow the story. So he changed. He became smaller, softer. In films like The Game Plan, audiences met a gentler version of The Rock, one designed for family movies and romantic comedies. Behind the scenes, whispers grew that he was finally adapting, that he had learned the language of Hollywood perfection. But something inside him resisted. Every compliment about his approachability cut deeper than praise. Because for a man who once stood like a mountain before millions, shrinking did not feel like progress. It felt like loss. The loss of the identity that made him who he was. And while the world clapped for his reinvention, the fire inside him began to flicker with restlessness. Then came the transformation no one could ignore. A decade after stepping away from wrestling, he returned to the screen larger than ever before. Not just bigger, impossibly bigger. In pain and gain, his body looked carved from stone, every muscle exaggerated beyond belief. Fans were stunned. Critics called it the comeback of the century. But behind closed doors, the questions began. How could a man in his 40s grow more massive than he had ever been in his 20s? How could he sustain such intensity, film after film, year after year, without rest or regression? The whispers that had followed other Hollywood physiques started to follow him too. His transformation became both a symbol of discipline and a seed of doubt. And as his fame soared, so did the suspicion that something unnatural was fueling the legend. With every movie, every photo shoot, every social media post, his body became his brand. The muscles were no longer just strength, they were currency. Roles like Hercules and Fast and Furious demanded the impossible. To stay shredded, to never show weakness, to look immortal. He could no longer be seen as human. He had to remain the titan the world expected. Those closest to him noticed the toll. Endless gym sessions, strict diets, a life that revolved around mirrors and cameras. Friends said he had turned his own body into a business, and that business could never sleep. There was no room for exhaustion or aging. Each day he woke up competing not against others, but against his own reflection. And as the years passed, it was clear, the man who once broke limits was now trapped inside one. When the world wanted to know how he stayed so enormous, the answer seemed simple: food. Plate after plate, meal after meal. The internet was flooded with his diet plans: codfish, rice, eggs, oatmeal, steak, sweet potatoes, pancakes stacked higher than a tower. 7 meals a day, 12 labors of eating, he called it. But as nutritionists analyzed the math, something did not fit. The calories were inconsistent. The protein ratios fluctuated. Even bodybuilders questioned how such a diet could sustain that kind of muscle year-round. Fans began recreating his meal plans at home, believing they too could become giants if they just worked as hard. But they did not have the same trainers, chefs, or pharmaceutical secrets that hide behind the veil of Hollywood. What looked like discipline might have been design. What looked like hard work might have been chemistry. Yet his followers never stopped believing, because belief was the product. Every post about his cheat meals, every motivational caption, kept the illusion alive. The man who could out-eat, outlift, and outlast anyone became a myth you could subscribe to. But myths, when repeated too many times, begin to crumble under their own perfection. Before sunrise, the iron clanged. Videos showed him drenched in sweat, veins crawling across his skin like vines of determination. He called it the Iron Paradise. There were no rest days, no excuses, no fatigue. His routines mirrored those of competitive bodybuilders at their peak. High volume, relentless intensity, no off-season. Yet this was not a man in his 20s preparing for a single event. This was a man in his 50s, maintaining godlike form every single day. Sports scientists whispered about recovery limits, muscle repair, and natural hormone decline. The human body was not built for endless peaks. But to the millions who watched, The Rock seemed to have found the secret code. Every video of him lifting impossible weight, every caption about outworking the competition, sold a fantasy that age could be conquered through willpower alone. And though he preached balance and gratitude, his body told another story, a story of obsession disguised as inspiration. Behind the barbell smiles, there was a battle no one could see. The war between biology and branding. Rumors began to swirl louder than ever. Podcasts, interviews, and forums all asked the same question. Was The Rock truly natural? Voices like Joe Rogan brought the topic to the mainstream, replaying his teenage admission of trying steroids in his youth. But this time, it was different. His physique no longer looked like the result of youthful experiments. It looked superhuman. Hollywood, however, stayed silent. Studios could not afford to question the myth they profited from. Family-friendly blockbusters depended on his clean image, the smile, the charisma, the relentless optimism. Behind the closed doors of training camps and film sets, whispers said that his transformation was chemically crafted. But nothing was ever proven. No confession, no scandal. Only an aura of suspicion that followed him from gym to gym. The hypocrisy ran deeper. The same industry that demands perfection also condemns the methods required to achieve it. And caught in the middle stood a man whose silence was louder than any denial. Hardest worker in the room. That phrase became his gospel. It was printed on shirts, stitched into gym bags, carved into his brand. It was more than a slogan, it was an identity. But identities come with chains. To admit even a single flaw would mean dismantling the entire empire. If he confessed to enhancement, the illusion would collapse, and the millions who worshipped his discipline would feel deceived. Those who knew him best said that the real struggle was no longer in the gym, it was in his mind. Maintaining perfection had become his greatest fear. Cameras followed him everywhere, and every photo was a competition against his past self. There was no rest from the image. The muscles that once symbolized freedom had become armor, heavy, cold, and suffocating. Every smile in front of a camera was a negotiation with the truth. Every post was a performance. The price of being invincible was losing the right to be human. In the end, the story was never just about one man. It was about an industry built on fantasy, an empire of filters, supplements, and silent chemicals. The Rock's journey became a mirror reflecting society's obsession with perfection. His image inspired millions, yet quietly pressured countless young men to chase the impossible. Many began experimenting with steroids, convinced that hard work could transform them into demigods. But the cost was real: damaged bodies, broken health, shattered self-esteem. The Rock once said he wanted to be a symbol of discipline and authenticity. Perhaps he still believes that. But the legend he created has grown beyond control, a myth larger than the man himself. The truth about how he maintains his body may never be spoken, because the truth might break the dream. And in a world where dreams are currency, silence becomes survival. The muscles remain, the brand endures, but somewhere beneath the tattoos, beneath the perfect smile, there is a man who once just wanted to be strong and became trapped by the very strength that made him a god. The crowd still cheers when he walks out. The cameras still flash. To most, he will forever be the Rock, the symbol of power, success, and grit. But the story behind those muscles tells a different tale. That perfection always demands a price, and the higher the pedestal, the heavier the fall. Because sometimes, the strongest man in the world is also the one carrying the deepest secret.